myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with my colleagues across the aisle that there is a role for the federal government to play in election infrastructure, campaign finance disclosure, ballot access, transparency, and election security. However, H.R. 1 was developed to serve the special interest of Democrats and the outside organizations that support the Democratic Party and will not accomplish its alleged goal of being for the people. The greatest threat to our nation's election system is partisanship, and that's what we're seeing right here in H.R. 1. It misuses taxpayer dollars, takes power away from states to administer their own elections, and threatens to limit Americans' constitutional rights. H.R. 1 proposes all groups limit free speech and imposes vague standards that disadvantage citizens who wish to advocate on behalf of any public policy issue. Every American has a right to support causes they believe in, and that's exactly why the American Civil Liberties Union echo my concerns. The ACLU said that there are provisions that unconstitutionally impinge on the free speech rights of American citizens and public interest organizations. When groups who have traditionally supported the Democratic Party cannot support H.R. 1, it underscores why election reform legislation should not be developed in a partisan manner. H.R. 1 overreaches our Constitution by taking power away from states that decide how their election should be administered, states that know their residents' election needs much better than a federal bureaucracy does. Congress should be partnering with states to support them in increasing voter registration, instead of forcing a federally mandated one-size-fits-all approach that will be costly and ineffective. This bill also fails to include safeguards while implementing many new voter registration and voting practices. I cannot stress enough that Congress should absolutely be in favor of increasing access to the polls, but we do that by adding the necessary checks and balances to ensure these votes and that access are protected. We should allow states to maintain their own voter rolls in order to process voters in a timely manner on Election Day, avoid unfunded mandates, and manage voter lists to avoid voting irregularities. A few voting irregularities can change the outcome of a single election, especially when you live in a competitive district like I do. Every single vote makes a difference between winning and losing. If we pass the new voter registration practices in H.R. 1 without creating safeguards to prevent voting irregularities in these practices, we risk taking away the choice of the American people. Simply another way H.R. 1 is taking away the voice of each American voter. If we want to increase our election security, Congress should support states choosing their own methods and machines. Multiple points of entry are more secure than one system. Federalizing election security, as this legislation does, will not protect voters. When H.R. 1 was introduced, it was referred to 10 committees in the House. This bill, which is now over 600 pages, will now have gone from introduction to general debate on the floor of the House, with only half of those 10 committees holding a single hearing and only one of those committees holding a markup. The Democrats promised greater transparency in the majority, but we're not seeing that in their first major piece of legislation. We just received the CBO score of H.R. 1, which egregiously underestimates H.R. 1's cost to the taxpayers by conveniently leaving out many of the legislation's most expensive provisions. H.R. 1's campaign match provision is what is being left out. CBO said they needed more time to develop a more comprehensive score. That was ignored. Though my Democratic colleagues may have changed where exactly the bucket is, they're still using H.R. 1 to put more money into politicians' campaigns. H.R. 1 is creating public subsidies through the 6-to-1 government match program on small dollar campaign contributions of up to $200. For every $200, the federal government, the taxpayers, will now pay $1,200 to a politician, to members of Congress's campaigns. Why my colleagues across the aisle now say this will be of no cost to the taxpayer, as of a new gimmick that they developed yesterday, I would like to point out that every single House Democrat signed on to co-sponsor this legislation before any changes were made to this provision. Make no mistake, the new majority wants to put your hard-earned tax dollars into their own campaigns. While they may have changed the route to get there, that is their fundamental goal with this obvious sham campaign finance reform. They say they want to get money out of politics. but they're using this bill, H.R. 1, to funnel more in. Provisions like this do not belong in any campaign finance or election reforms. Election reform should be bipartisan, not serving the interest of partisan politicians. As we move forward with the debate today, I hope my colleagues across the aisle will thoughtfully reconsider their eager support of a bill that will harm the American voter and taxpayer, and not simply vote, as we've seen throughout this not open process, vote on partisan lines. Every American's vote should be counted and protected. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Illinois reserves the balance of his time. Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you.